right. So welcome to my presentation. My name's Sam Kane-Gerard, and I guess we'll just get started. Thank you for coming. So here. All right, okay, cool. Just making sure it looks right. All right, so my project that I did was on digital sampling and the techniques and usage in the modern music industry. And but before we start, I just want to kind of go over an agenda and just kind of talk about what I'm going to be discussing in this PowerPoint, because I'm going to basically have two sections to my presentation. First, I'm going to be discussing my research and the history and attitudes and some of the legal issues, and then some of my own research, like my surveys and stuff like that. And then the second part, I'm going to go into more of my project. So the first part's more about what my paper was on, but my project was more kind of about expressing my own kind of musical creativity, and just kind of going in and working on my own song that I did in a program called Ableton Live. But we'll get into that later. That's around the end. I'm just going to make sure I try and have enough time to get to that. So, but before we even go into that, I'm just going to talk really quick about why SYP for me, because I think that's kind of an important part of my project, is because where this really was all inspired from, you know? So with me, I'd actually been thinking about this project for a long time because I had friends who had done SYP. And with me, it's like ever since elementary school, you know, you'd always have all these multi-subject classes, and you know, you'd have your history, you'd have your English, you'd have your math, and you got your homework in this class, you got an essay in this class, you got a test in this class, and it's all just, you know, all crazy in my head. And with this, with SYP, it was just this opportunity to just kind of give myself this kind of tunnel vision, just to focus on this one subject and give myself my own goals, you know, where I was the teacher, I'm the student, you know, I give myself my own assignments, and then I go and I reach out and I try to get to those goals, you know what I mean? So it was just a really great experience, and especially having my own kind of support team with Mr. McGrath, Mr. Kenosi, Miss Kennedy, and all my peers who were there to help me. So I think overall it was just a really, really enriching experience, and it was a chance for me to kind of pursue one of my passions, which is music. And so then I'll kind of go into more about my paper now, which is kind of like just the whole idea, the history of it. So the big three: my topic, my question that I wanted to answer, and my thesis. So the topic, like I said before, was musical sampling, kind of the history around it, and just, you know, in general, like the attitudes around it. And the question that I really wanted to answer was, what is really the history of sampling? Where did it start, and what does it mean, you know, today? And what I kind of came up with is really the history of sampling. It started back a long time ago, but really where it changed the industry to where it is today is really the digital side of it. And that's because of the whole idea of copyright law and how it's really changed the music that we hear today, and just, you know, copyright law in general, and the way cases go and stuff like that. So I mean, and a lot of opinions really vary on it based on kind of the sonic and creative uses for it. But one thing that I'm really trying to prove here is just that it has really affected the industry to make it what it is today. So I'm not trying to, like, you know, put really any opinions on people as to how they feel about it, but I just want to, you know, show that it really has played a big part in the music industry. And again, I'm talking about sampling a lot, but I haven't really explained it to you yet, so that's where I want to get to. So I really want to talk about what is it? You know, what is sampling? Because I don't know if everyone here is familiar with it. So sampling is defined as to use a segment of a musical recording as part of one's own recording. Now this segment generally will come from someone else's music. The thing is, I say a segment because it can come from yourself, like it can come from your own recording, and then you can sample it over, you can do whatever you want with it. But it's basically where you take like a musical quotation from someone else's song generally, and you'll take that quotation and you'll put it in your own music. And then with that, you can cut it up, you can, you know, loop it around, you can add some effects onto it, you can do whatever you want. But what you're directly doing is taking from another song and putting it in your own. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of controversy around that as far as legal issues. So there's a couple of questions that I wanted to answer about this kind of phenomenon called digital sampling. So basically I have these three buttons here because, and what it's going to do is it's going to take us to specific slides so that I can really answer the question directly, so I'm not kind of, you know, jumping around it, and we just go right to it. So the first one I want to answer is, where did sampling start? What's the history of it, and how did it evolve? So for the first part, we're going to jump back to the 18th century with an amazing composer named Johann Sebastian Bach. And now Bach, one of the things that he was known for, maybe not at the time, but one of the things that we learned later, is it was actually common for him to go and take different ideas and different concepts from his predecessors and use them in his own music. And his biggest influences was an Italian composer named Antonio Vivaldi. And the reason why this is related to sampling is because not only did Bach go and make arrangements of Vivaldi's concertos, but what he would also do is he would take different musical patterns and just different parts of Antonio Vivaldi's compositions, and he would use them in his own, which is basically this term called musical borrowing, which is very similar to sampling, but the main difference is that it's played out. And we can see that later on with groups like Led Zeppelin, borrowing from older blues bands, or just other stuff like that. So it's not something that's really out of the ordinary. It is really common for people to go and take from their inspirations. So moving on, let's kind of jump forward to around the 1970s, because we're jumping right into really the start of digital sampling. And where it started was really when the start of hip-hop came along. And so basically I'll talk a little bit about the start of hip-hop first, and then I'll connect that to digital sampling. So basically what really started this whole genre was these DJs would be spinning all these really these funky tunes. You'd see like a lot of these amazing funk bands, and the DJs would spin these records, but what they would find is that when the audience would be dancing the most was to these sections called breaks. And these breaks were basically when the guitar would go out, the horns would go out, all the lead instruments would go out, and you just have the percussion. You might have the bass, but for the most part you just have the percussion. And then that came the whole idea of break beats. So what these DJs would do is they would go and they'd find these break beats, they'd find these breaks, and they'd loop them around and keep on playing them, and then sooner or later they'd have a vocalist come in and they'd start laying down lyrics over it, and that's how hip-hop started. But what the important part about this all is that people like Kool Herc and Africa and Bambaataa, they were some of the first people to digital sample, to use this whole idea of digital sampling, because they would take these breaks and they'd use it in their own music, in their own sets, and then eventually use it in hip-hop music. So some of the people they would be sampling from was the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, the Jimmy Castor Bunch, but most prominently the James Brown Band. And one of the main reasons behind that was because of their drummer, Clyde Stubblefield. Now, I'm a drummer personally, and I really, one of the reasons I really love Clyde Stubblefield is because he was just so innovative, with his grooves that he would make. And that's part of the reason why he was sampled so much, is because his grooves, they were just so funky, they were just so, like I said, innovative. They were just so genius, and just so good to play back and listen to. So a lot of the places that where they were sampled were his breaks, where it would just break and it'd have him playing drums. So for instance, two of the most sampled songs of all time were Cold Sweat and The Funky Drummer, played by, of course, Clyde Stubblefield, the Funky Drummer. That's what they call him. So I'm going to actually show you an example of that, and kind of one of the first groups to really use this sample and incorporate it into their own music. So I'm going to be playing this out for you. And for the first part, I'm going to be playing The Funky Drummer by James Brown, by the James Brown Band. But I'm going to skip right to the break just so you can hear it. And when you listen to it, listen really closely to the snare, because as you listen to these samples more, it becomes easier and easier to identify them. But for this, it's a little difficult. So listen very closely to the snare sound, which kind of has this very metallic sound to it and this very open sound to it. So yeah, I'll play this. So James is going to count in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the break starts. So here. So see, now that break has been, just that break alone has been used in hundreds of songs. It has been sampled in so many songs, and this isn't the only one. This isn't the only person who's been sampled like that. For instance, a guy named Melvin Bliss, he has a 10-second sample from one of his songs, or no, even I believe it's 5 seconds, and even that has been used in hundreds of songs, as far as pop songs, hip hop songs, all over the place. But for the most part, this is one of the first really big hits to use this, this huge sample that was so widely used by a group called Public Enemy. And so I'll skip right to where they start. And one of the reasons I like this sample, or I like the way they use this sample, is because they actually mention it in the song. They say sound of the funky drummer. So here, I'll go ahead and play this for you, and I'll skip to it.
Yet our best trained, best educated. Another summer. Sound of the funky drummer. Music hitting your heart, 'cause I know you got soul.
So again, that sample's kind of hard to hear, but if you just listen to that snare drum, you can almost make it out. Because the thing is, they didn't use the full break, they just used the first kind of a measure. So it's a little bit difficult to hear, but they do use that, and then they use that in a lot more songs. It's actually a very common sample. So now let's go back and let's talk about some of the legal limitations in popular music. So first we're going to talk about some of the major cases that really happened. So some of the first big cases that happened was around the late 80s. We have a group called De La Soul, a hip-hop group, and they sampled a 10 to 12 second sample from the intro of a song by the Turtles. And this 10 to 12 second sample, it was a little bit difficult to hear because it was edited. It was edited to the point where you almost couldn't tell. But they ended up getting sued by the record company that the Turtles were under, and they ended up having to pay $150,000 per second of that sample, which is easily over $1 million. And for the time, that was a lot of money. For now, it's a lot of money. For the time, that was like $10 million, So that was a huge deal, because that was one of the first cases where someone had to pay tons and tons of money just for this small sample. And it wasn't even a main song on their album, it was an interlude song. So I thought that was interesting. And then another big case was between Biz Markie and Gilbert O'Sullivan. And the main thing that was very important about this case was that, first of all, Biz Markie ended up having to recall all his albums and destroy them, just because of this sampled song where he sampled Alone Again in his song Alone Again. So he made the title the same thing. And basically what this did is, because the sample that he took was just some chords that were so short, it was literally, I think, about like 2 seconds or something like that. And because it was so short, and that the judge didn't really kind of give much detail into it, so what it basically did is created this legal limbo, because it kind of brought it into this state where there wasn't a really exact restriction on how much you could sample. So because there are these no set restrictions, you could literally be sued for any sample, no matter how short. It could be a millisecond sample, it could be nanosecond. You could still be sued for it, and you could have all your albums, recalled and destroyed. So that's really why that case was important. So now we're going to be talking kind of about the legal limitations today. So there are two ways to pay for a sample now. There's a legal license, and then there's doing it through the royalty rate. A legal license can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 if you're paying for a major label, but then if you're paying by the royalty rate, it costs half a cent to 3 cents for every record that you press with that sampled song on it. So if you have like 8 samples per song on however many songs you want on your record, and if you're pressing 1 million copies of that record, you're going to end up paying tons and tons and tons and tons of money. So that's one way to do it, but it gets even worse if you don't get for one of these samples. Because sometimes an artist can give it to you for free, but for the most part, if you want to do it just legally with the major labels, this is what you'll have to pay. But if you don't do this license, basic fees will double, and then you can also be charged with a statutory damage where you can pay over $100,000 or more. And then you can also have all your albums recalled today. And there are tons of artists who will end up having to destroy their albums, or who will end up having to pay extra money. And there's almost not a single rap artist out there who uses this digital sampling and won't end up having to pay at least some amount for these samples. So now let's hop back a sec. And now we're going to kind of go into the public view about this, because I really wanted to understand what the public view, what people thought about this, and people who didn't understand it, who had just learned about that, how do they feel about it? So I went ahead and I went and found a couple surveys. one of the surveys I did myself, but then the first two I got from a website called hiphopmakers.com that they found that 95% of the users on that site, so the producers who use that site, said that they use sampling in their music. So that's very, very prominent, especially for this genre. But then also if we go to a website called My Les Paul, more based kind of around classically trained musicians, 80% of musicians said that they believed it was stealing. And if you look down in the comments, like around the poll, like there was a lot of negative comments. I'm not going to post that because there was a lot of swearing. But a lot of negative comments, people really just didn't like it. So then I was like, all right, I want to do my own survey. I want to see what people think maybe around our school, people that I know, and see kind of what the view is around that. So I got a ton of respondents. I got over 100 respondents, and I was really happy about that. And I basically explained what it was, explained some of the controversy around it, and then I just finished it off with, do you think it's something good, or do you think it's something bad? And then I allowed some of the people to go and post extra comments and kind of elaborate on why they thought that. So 60% said they thought it was something good, 40% said it was something bad, but there was really a common belief that I found in the comments was that they just thought that people should pay for royalties, or that they thought that they should be giving some credit to the artists that they were sampling from, otherwise it would just be stealing in their eyes. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then now what I want to go to is I want to go to a more recent example, since we're talking kind of more about this recent stuff. So there was a singer named Karma who was sampled in one of Lil Wayne's songs that got a lot of Lil Wayne songs got a lot of traction through radio play and just all over the media. And the thing is though is that no one really would have known about Karma unless they if not for Lil Wayne putting out this song and sampling her. I won't say nobody, but I'll say she got a lot of popularity just from this song, which is why there was some controversy around it. But the main thing that she was kind of upset about is not so much that she was sampled, but that her words were kind of twisted around to make it seem like she was saying something else, and I'll explain why. So I'll show you first what her sample sounded like, and I took this audio from a live performance. So there's a weird intro or something, but here I'll skip to the chorus for you.
Cause only once the drugs are done do I feel almost human now. And only once my head's unclear do I feel like dying right here.
So as you can hear, she's like unbelievable singer, really beautiful voice, like very, very heartfelt song, and a very sad song. I can't play the whole thing just because of the interest of time, but basically what the song about is just overcoming addiction and kind of making it out of this dark place. And then what I'll show you in Lil Wayne's song is his song is more about like, I gotta stay high for the rest of my life. I gotta stay high. I never want to stop getting high, So I'll play this for you, and you can hear the sample right away, and it was actually sped up a bit just to stick with the beats per minute of his song. So I'll play this for you a little bit, and I'll just like play up until the part where he like says like I gotta get lifted or something like that. So here, I'll play that for you.
Only once the drugs are
And you can hear the guitar in the background if you listen closely.
I feel like dying. I feel like dying. Only once the drugs are done. I feel like dying.
So yeah, so I can't play the whole thing just because of the interest of time, but the whole thing is just about doing drugs, and that's his decision to make the song. I'm not necessarily like making it seem like it's a bad thing for him to rap about that. I'm not going to even get into that, but the whole thing I'm just showing is that the way that he kind of twisted her words to make it seem like that which was really the reason why she was upset. So this for the most part, this is going to be the end of my PowerPoint. But first I want to leave you with a couple questions just to think about. So I'm not really going to answer these for you. I just kind of want the people around here just to think about them for a little bit. So a lot of people and a lot of more kind of classically trained producers and musicians will say that sampling is kind of this lazy thing. It's like a waste of time. It's not even an art form. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, but like, what about musical borrowing? What makes that so different when just because you're playing it instead of actually taking it digitally and putting it in your own music? So, for instance, Johann Sebastian Bach, going back to him a second, he's an unbelievable composer. He's an absolute musical genius, but he doesn't get the same flack that samplers do nowadays. So I just think that's a little bit interesting to think about. And also, is there a way for sampling to be considered 100% legal? I've talked with Mr. McGrath about this, and we've thought about it quite a bit, and it's a very difficult thing to think about. It's kind of the same way as asking, is there a way for there to be no crime in this world, And it can really kind of go both ways as far as the artist and the sampler. If someone's just going in and just, taking samples from anyone they want without permission, and just taking huge amounts of samples and just not, giving any credit to the people that they sample from, that's one thing, and that's one side of it that I really don't agree with personally. But then also another side where artists just, will give no help, I guess, towards samplers. If someone wants to sample one of their songs, just keep on asking for more and more money, and especially with record companies who will ask for a lot of money for these samples, which makes it difficult for artists who might not have as much money or might not be signed to a major label. So I just think that's interesting. And then the final thing is, can there be a price tag on creativity? Because I think that sampling really is a creative process, and as I'll show you in a little bit, and actually in a second, that it can be used in a really interesting way and to make something completely different. So can there really be a price tag on creativity? Because you do have to pay for these samples, and there is a good chance that if your song gets a lot of traction and it gets on the radio or gets on iTunes or something, you can get sued for enormous amounts of money that you probably don't have. So there's a lot of danger in sampling like this. So that's just a couple things I want to leave people to think about. And then I just finish off my bibliography. But now what I actually want to do is I actually want to show you directly what I did for my project with sampling. I used a program, so there's a lot of different software programs that you can use, but the one I used is called Ableton Live, which is a program you see a lot of big producers using. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to cut up a sample from a song called Hewitt October 1971 by a group called Cortex that has actually been sampled in a couple different songs by artists like Wiz Khalifa, MF Doom, and Odd Future. It doesn't matter if you haven't, if you've heard of them or if you haven't. That I just want to, kind of use kind of a more commonly sampled song and then kind of cut it up and make it into something different. So first I'm going to play the part that I'm going to sample really quick for you. So it's like about 30 seconds or something, and I'll just play this for you. So just listen closely a second. So that's for the most part what I'm going to be sampling. The main thing I'm going to be doing is kind of more around the intro around that. So I'm just going to be kind of going in, I'm going to be showing you basically how it looks like and what the process is of sampling, because it's not an easy thing. Just using this program and figuring out how to do what I'm about to do took me weeks and weeks, because I had never used anything like this before, and it was so difficult and so frustrating just for me to get this down, because it's a really complicated program, since you can go so in depth. Just to do kind of more basic stuff is very, very difficult, well, especially for me, just because I had never used anything like this before. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to take this audio and I'm going to drag it into this audio track right here. Then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going into what's called the waveform. And the waveform is essentially a visual image representing the amplitude and general shape of the audio. If you guys have ever studied, science, then a lot of the stuff in here is sine waves. There's a couple square waves, a couple triangle waves, but for the most part it's like sine waves, and it just shows the peaks in the audio, which is generally kick drums and snare drums, which is generally where the peaks are going to be. And that's what I want for my samples, because I wanted to start at a kick drum or start at a snare. And now what these yellow markers are, first of all, is Ableton goes in and they set all these warp markers, which will just mark these peaks, and it'll go and mark these all these peaks just in case, I guess, you want to sample them or something. But I don't want to use all these, they actually do help later on, and they create these things called transients, which are basically just the outline of these warp markers. So Ableton does a couple of things. First of all, they go and they set these warp markers for you, and they also have a set BPM, which is beats per minute, that they think the song is in. But I actually went in and beforehand and found my own BPM that I thought was more accurate, which was at about 82 beats per minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. I'm gonna get rid of these warp markers. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom in, and I can let you see, I guess, a little bit more in depth as to what they look like. And I'm gonna essentially break it down into 16th note markers, which is just kind of a way of counting time in music. So, and then here I have a whole list of all the places where I want to sample. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do that really quickly, just since I don't have really much time. But now what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna get rid of this first marker, and I'm gonna go ahead and set this first marker to 111, which just means that I'm gonna make it the beginning of where I want to sample, because I don't want to sample anything else before that. I just want to start right here. So I'm just gonna go through real quick, and I'm gonna try to do it as quickly as I can. And I'm gonna go ahead and mark up where I want to sample. And one thing you can see me doing right here is when I put down one of these markers, I drag it over to the 16th note marker. And essentially what that's doing is that's kind of stretching out actually hold on. That's kind of like stretching out the song a little bit. And basically the reason behind that is because artists like this, because this is kind of an older song, and artists like this won't always be recording with a click track, as in they won't be using always be using a metronome. So since they're not using a metronome, they can sometimes get off time. So in order just to keep this all in time and whatnot, I'm going to be dragging this over to the markers, just so that it stays in a beats per minute, like in a BPM that I like, and the correct timing. So here, I'm just gonna finish this up. And last one. All right, and now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be doing what's called slicing it to a new preset. And I already have a preset that I made beforehand, but what this is gonna allow me to do is now actually go and use my MIDI controller, this keyboard here. I'm gonna be able to play back and trigger these samples. And it's actually a very cool thing. And here I can actually get rid of these because I don't need them. So I'm just gonna go and I can play these for you, and I can play them back, and just kind of remember and try and remember the song I played before, so I can trigger these markers and I can kind of play with them and stuff. So this is where my first sample starts. So I can trigger any of these samples I want, so I can play through the whole thing. I can play it. I can just go on through and play through all these samples. If I wanted to, I could just play the whole song just on this keyboard, because what it's done is I've basically marked with these warp markers, I've marked where the sample starts, where it ends, and then starts again. So a warp marker after the first one will basically mark the ending, but then it'll also start another one. So if I wanted to, I could play through the entire song just with these keys. So I think that's actually pretty cool, and then I can trigger them, and I can make my whole song with them. But before I do that, I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly, I'm gonna throw in some drums, because I wanna make sure I have some drums on my track here. So I already have some that I set and laid out. I have a kick drum, I have a snare drum, I have a hi-hat, and I have actually no, I don't want to use this. I have a ride cymbal. So I can play through that real quick. I have this on the next octave just so everything's all organized. So there's my kick drum. there's my snare, and there's my hi-hat, there's my ride. And so what I'm going to do really quick, just to kind of fix these up, is I'm going and I'm increasing the release time. That just makes it so whenever I trigger these on the keyboard, I won't have to go and hold it down just to get the full sound to come out. I can just press it once. And so I'm going to set these up, and then what I'm going to do finally, before I show you the final product, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how you can use audio effects. So first of all, I'm going to set this to send and receive, so I can send over audio effects, or so I can send over my instruments to these audio effects. Because what I want to do is, especially for the kick drum and the snare, I want to kind of liven them up a little bit more, because I don't really like the sounds they have right now. I mean, it's kind of bland. You know, they're just kind of boring, I guess, to me. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to first put an equalizer onto the kick drum, and I'll show you what I'll do with that in a second. And then I'm also going to put some reverb on the snare drum. And so as you can see here, the EQer, or the equalizer, I should say, the EQ, is what that's going to do is it's going to have an A on it, so that I can go and I can send it over to A, so I can send my kick drum to the equalizer, and then there's a B on the reverb, so that I can send my snare to B to the reverb. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use this equalizer on my kick drum, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be not changing the frequency of the kick drum, but I'm essentially, what this is going to do is going to let me highlight a certain frequency on the kick drum. And I guess through my research and through I guess what a lot of musicians will say is that 60 hertz is a frequency that really lets the kick drum penetrate through the music, and it has this really punchy feel to it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that 60 hertz, and I'm going to increase the gain to about 10. So that's going to kind of highlight that frequency and give me a really nice punchy sound. So I'll show you what I had before. So again, just kind of, you know, a little boring, I guess. And then what I have now. I don't know if you can hear that super well. It sounds a little bit better if you have like a subwoofer, if you have like a good speaker system. But basically here, I'll turn it up a little bit more just so you can kind of hear it. So it kind of has this deeper and punchier sound that'll really penetrate through the music, which is exactly what I want. I just want my drums to be a little bit more lively, you know? So now I'm gonna go over to the reverb, and basically reverberation is basically what it will do is it's kind of, I guess it's defined as kind of like the persistence of a sound in a particular space after the original sound is produced. So what happens is with a sound, it produces these things called reflections. So when you hear a sound, or when I talk, if I'm in an open room, the sound that comes out of my mouth will go and it'll bounce off the walls, and it'll be absorbed into the chairs and into the rug. And the reverber and these reflections are just the sound that's left over after the initial sound. And the decay time, which is what I'm going to be affecting here, is just the amount of time that it takes for these reflections to be absorbed to the point where you can't hear them anymore. So what's cool about this is that the snare that I had initially sounds like it was recorded in like a 2-inch closet or something. So if I like that sound, I can go ahead and I can, keep that on. That's what I had before. But if for some reason I want my snare to sound like it was recorded in a 600-mile long cave, then I can increase the decay time all the way up, so I'll have this really long sounding snare, so the reflections will last a long time. So you can kind of hear it almost sounds like wind afterwards. So, but I don't want that. I don't want it to sound like it's in a gymnasium or something. I just want it to kind of be a more lively sound. So now it's instead of sounding like what I had initially, like this, it's going to sound more like this. So like that whole sound. So the whole idea was just kind of showing you that I can use these audio effects, not just on drums. I can use any of these audio effects on anything. I can use it on my samples. I can use it on my, my drum rack. I can use it on any sound that I get out of Ableton, or any sound that I put on Ableton. So it just gives you an idea of what I can do with these samples, or what I can do with anything that I put into here. So it just gives you so much more room for creativity, really. And once I do all that, I ended up adding a little bit more drums. I ended up editing the sound a little bit more, and I came up with my own little song that I made just out of what I have here. Again, a couple more drums, but just with with this in Ableton. So I'll play that for you right now. So this is what I ended up finishing with. I just kind of let the whole thing just fade out. And this was actually really the first piece of music that I really made with Ableton, so it's not really perfect, and it's you know, it's not the greatest thing that's ever been created, but for me it was really fun to make, and I thought it sounded good, I guess, to me. And it took me a really long time to make this. I mean, even just this one song took me weeks and weeks of preparation to do. So that just kind of gives you an idea that it's not just like I'm going in, you know, I'm taking this song, putting in my own, and boom, I'm done. I got the best song ever. You know, it's a lot of steps that really go into it, you know, and it's a really difficult process. So I guess in conclusion for this, I really, to be honest, I really enjoyed doing this in general, and you know, not just even just getting to go and have kind of a break from regular school, but just really going to pursue something that I was really interested in, and just learning more about it and learning more, I guess, about my own musical expression. And I guess the main thing I can leave you with is just try and remember those questions that I told you before. And the main one that I really like about that is there a price tag on creativity? Because if I were to release this song, and if it were to gain enough traction, where to the point where I could be sued, I could end up having to pay, you know, an entire house. You know, just to give you an idea of the price. I could end up having to mortgage my house. I could end up having to sell my car. Again, I don't have a house or car. This is just, you know, all hypothetical. But I could end up having, you know, get rid of all these things, and I'd have to be able to change, and I'd have to change my life just because I wanted to do something a little bit different. So that just gives you an idea of kind of how the industry now is. So, yeah, thank you. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer.
Is that the theme song from the show Love Boat?
From a show, wait, what show?
There was a show called The Love Boat.
I'm not
Like,
I hate to show my age, but
no, like,
Oh, no,
it
it's
might have
fine.
been sampling of
yeah.
No, it could have. This song has been sampled a lot.
the theme song.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like little bits of it.
Didn't sound that way to me. But
Okay.
Oh, it could have been. I mean, really anything could have been, because it's sampling in general, all over the radio, all over TV, everywhere. Like, if you go and just look at the top 10 on iTunes right now, I guarantee probably at least half of those songs are gonna have some sort of sampling involved in it, because it's something that's really widely done as far as producers go nowadays.
Are there any artists who encourage sampling, like publish their music free from copyright, or?
There are artists who view it as an art form. The thing is that a lot of those artists have had to deal with copyright before, but what a lot of artists will do nowadays is they'll try and kind of mask their samples, so to speak. So they'll kind of edit them, or they'll kind of make them more in the background, so that the ones that they think they will get sued for, no one will be able to hear. So for instance, there are sites that will go ahead and find, and they'll list the samples from like certain popular songs that you might find on the radio. But you know, some of these artists will go and they'll basically ask the site to take down any of the listings of their samples, just that they won't get in trouble with them. But for instance, I guess some artists that use samples in their music, I mean, probably I guess one of the biggest ones would be a group called Daft Punk. And one interesting thing around them is that all of their music is like 100% samples. And they're these amazing artists. They do amazing live shows. They make amazing music, but all of their music is sampled. They've had to deal with a lot of different copyright stuff. But if you do go and find the artist that you're sampling from and try and contact with them, and if you ask them nicely, generally they'll be they should be fine with it. But sometimes they won't, which is kind of where the legal issues come from. But there are a lot of artists that sampled it. Actually, I actually used an interview for my project that I have on my website with a producer named Ninth Wonder, who was talking kind of about the art of sampling. He's more of an older producer in kind of the hip hop scene, but he was talking about kind of the art about it and kind of what he has to deal with and just the process of it and really how difficult it is. And then just making like one song could take a year even. So just doing this one thing, it's just not something that's like super easy. That's just what he was kind of trying to convey. But yeah, there's a lot of mixed feelings about it, especially in as far as like the major labels go. So yeah.
So your questions that you came up with,
Mm-hmm.
how'd you come up with those? What made you?
They're just kind of questions that I wanted to, I guess, answer for myself and then trying to answer for other people. I guess one of the main places where I ended up thinking about them a lot was I was in a class called HipHop. It was like literally the history of hip hop with Mr. Goddard, who's really great teacher, knows so much about the subject, and it was really great experience to be in that class. And I actually used a lot of stuff that I learned in that class in my paper, so it was a perfect class for my paper. And I used a lot of the information that I took from that just to kind of answer questions that I hadn't had to answer in class. Just to try and go in, do research, read books, and kind of answer them for myself. Okay. Anyone else?
I have 2 questions.
Okay, sure.
One is when you read books about your topic, do any titles come to mind, things that you would recommend for people who are interested in this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, as far as the history of hip hop goes, that it actually has a lot to do with digital sampling. So I would definitely recommend that. There's a book called Can't Stop, Won't Stop that is written by Jeff Chang, which we used in my hip hop class, which is a really great book. That's a good one. And then there's another one I used by a man whose name that I cannot and won't even try to pronounce. But most of the books are just that you can find out there will just be titled with that. Great places to find that are Amazon. Amazon's a good place to look. And if you just look for through some of the articles that you might find on the internet or through like university sites, there are really some great places to find info about that. A lot of the info I found was from articles that were written by students or professors working at universities. And yeah, second question. yeah, sure.
So you mentioned Clyde Stubblefield and
Yeah.
Melvin Bliss. Was this part of were those 2 names or artists part of your personal library before you began this project, or did this project lead you to that library?
With Melvin Bliss, I did not know about him beforehand. With Clyde Stubblefield, I was a fan of the James Brown Band, but I don't think I really understood like how much they had really affected, I guess, the industry nowadays, and especially hip hop. And I guess I started learning about them a lot in my hip hop class, so I think I grew to appreciate, especially Clyde Stubblefield, because he's one of my favorite drummers now. I really enjoy listening to him play. It's actually interesting because before then my favorite drummer was the drummer for Led Zeppelin named John Bonham, which I thought was interesting because talking about the whole like hypocrisy around that, around the fact that they were, they would go and they would take some of their riffs from older blues bands. So I just thought that was I guess kind of interesting, just to kind of view the comparison between the two of them. But no, I didn't. I guess I wasn't as avid of a listener of Clyde Stubblefield's music beforehand. So yeah, I think I actually discovered a lot of music while I was working on this project, and I love discovering music, so it worked out perfect. Yeah, sure. Anyone else?
One more question.
Okay, sure.
In your presentation, you made a comparison with modern day sampling and Bach, and I know that Bach borrowed musical phrases. He didn't necessarily use audio recordings.
Yeah.
Whereas today, we not only borrow musical phrases, but also borrow the actual recording of that.
Yeah.
Do you make a distinction between that, between borrowing just a composition?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, Well, like, do I make a distinction in my paper? Is that?
No, in your opinion, do you,
Oh, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I guess my personal opinion, like the main thing I want to do in my paper is kind of not include my opinion, just to kind of like put the like information out so that people can come up with their own opinions, just make a more educated opinion. But my going to my personal opinion, I personally believe it's kind of the same idea. I mean, sampling, it's really taking a lot from, I mean, you're not going to really be using music that you don't like, you know? It's using stuff that you've enjoyed from other people and from people that you were inspired by, and using it in your own to create something that you think might, you know, pay homage to them, for instance. That's what, actually, if you guys know Will Smith, which I hope you do, and back when he was a hip-hop artist with DJ Jazzy Jeff, if you know him from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but they actually did make music, and they actually were interviewed in a documentary that I saw, saying that, you know, the whole thing using the James Brown band's music was almost kind of paying homage to them and revitalizing their music. So I think with me, as far as my samples, I love sampling older artists, especially singers. I love like these older female singers who have this kind of like old-timey voice. I think it's just like beautiful to have in your samples. So I love going back and taking stuff, I guess, from my predecessors, from people that inspire me. So I think as far as that goes, I think that's the same idea. And I think, personally, in my opinion, I think it should be viewed as the same idea. But I think for the most part, it's not really, you know, people don't really view it as the same thing. Like if you play it, then, you know, if you play it on an instrument, then people don't look at it as the same way if you're actually going and directly taking it, you know? So, for instance, I mean, for instance, you could write a book just by using other people's words, you know, and people have done that before. But it's just really kind of like how you do it that I guess like gets the legal issues kind of stirring. But my personal opinion is they're kind of the same thing, and I think that it should be encouraged, I guess, from my point of view. But again, I don't want to get like too much into my opinion, just because I kind of want to put the information out there and let people decide their own opinions, you know.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.